for our Value of Sport lunch, which allows me to welcome up some rather familiar faces to come and join us. Please give a thunderous Hong Kong China Rugby welcome to the chair of the Laureus Academy and one of the all-time all-black captains, Mr. Sean Fitzpatrick, joins us up on stage. Fitzy, a warm welcome. We also welcome up, she is a two-time Rugby World Cup winner. She is a member of the World Rugby Hall of Fame. Hurrah, please come and join us. Warm welcome. And so we've got two Kiwis. Let's balance it out with a touch of South Africa. He is a former World Player of the Year. He's a World Cup winner. He's a two-time Laureus World Sports Award winner, Schalk. And completing a rather impressive lineup, he's quite simply one of the greatest Olympians ever. Gold at 5 consecutive Olympic Games, Sir Steve Redgrave. Guys, welcome all. Lovely to have you here, and a big thank you for being part of a really important day on a subject that means so much to all of you, because sport on and off the pitch has defined large chunks of your lives, who you are, what you've done, and as much as you have given us joy through sport, so sport has given all of you guys so much. And I know being here is something you're delighted to do, and you're very passionate about this space, and particularly for you, Sean, through this being a Laureus supported event, as a chairman, it's a really big part of what you've been doing for some time now. And Ned mentioned a moment ago that 2000 Laureus Sport for Good Foundation kicking off, and arguably the greatest role model the world has had over the last few decades, Nelson Mandela. You were in the room when Laureus kicked off, so to speak, and when Nelson Mandela brought you all together. What was that moment, that occasion like?
Thank you very much. Absolute pleasure to be here back in Hong Kong with some friends that we've created over the years, and to be here with Robbie. Lovely to see you. One of our first projects, Operation Breakthrough, was one of our first and one of our very successful programs, which is still running today. Laureus was created in 2000, and one of our founders, Johan Rupert, from the Richmond Group, created a group of former athletes that were brought together to celebrate excellence in sport. And we met in Monaco, and we had the most amazing awards. I think there was about 35 founder members. Of those 35 founder members, about 30 of us assembled, and I happened to be one of those. And Johan Rupert came into the room and said, "This is the greatest moment of my life. I can tell you, to be sitting in the same room as some of the greatest sports people ever." And he went around the room, Martina Navratilova, etc., Boris Becker, and in those days, being a former rugby player, I was not the most liked man in South Africa. And he said, "I have handpicked you all. And to show that I was totally impartial, I have the man that all South Africans love to hate, Sean Fitzpatrick." And he said, your founding patron will be Nelson Mandela. We all went, "Oh, that's fantastic, wonderful, thank you very much." And the door opened, and in walked the greatest man, as you said, the greatest man I've ever met, Nelson Mandela. And he said, "It's wonderful that you're here to celebrate the excellence of sport, but you also have another opportunity to use your voice to show that sport has the power to change the world." And that was the start of the Sport for Good movement. And I think it was 2002 that we had our first program. And it gives me great pride to sit here with my fellow Academy members, realising now that we are 23 years old. We are in 45 different countries. We have 300 programs. We use sport as a mechanism for change. And to be here back in Hong Kong, where I think we have made a difference, without question. And I could go through the number of programs where without sport, those 6.5 million children that we've been in contact with, it wouldn't have happened if it wasn't through sport. And I just think personally, being a former sports person, sport changed my life. It gave me an opportunity. And I just think the more we can do to help children change their lives, it's for the better. I've just come from New Zealand, and we're a country of 5 million people. And we have a horrendous problem with children being bad people. And they're not bad people, they just don't get the right advice. They haven't got the right mentors, they don't respect people. And through sport, we're changing lives down there too. So it's great to be here. It's great to be back in Hong Kong.
And it is great to have you here, as it is your fellow New Zealand superstar. Rugby, so you're nodding there as Sean was talking about the challenges in New Zealand at the moment. You have a space as a role model, not just as a rugby star, but as a women's rugby star. And much like Nolly, who's with us here today, you broke a lot of ground in terms of tilting the gender bias in rugby. How do you see your role as a role model in New Zealand rugby, speaking to both the kind of challenges that Fitzy's just mentioned, but also being a leading woman in sport in New Zealand?
Firstly, hello. Thanks for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here. I think the last time I was in Hong Kong at the Hong Kong Sevens was prior to COVID, so I think that was 2018-19. So it's been a very long time. But to answer your question, you know, the challenges that women have faced throughout the years, I think, have brought resilience to the game. I think not only the women, but you know, everyone that has you know, donned the jersey, I guess. And yeah, through those challenges, through sports, you know, it's a part of it, and how we respond to them, to that is what truly matters. Whether it's bouncing back from a loss, or you know, going through injuries and things like that, you know, or pushing through mental barriers. Sports have taught me to persevere in the face of adversity, and these are valuable life lessons I think we can all take from this, instilling a mindset of resilience, determination, grit and adaptability. It's very important. And so, yeah, in everyday life, I think.
You've got many unique achievements. One of them is, I think, you and your mum were the first mother-daughter combination to represent the national team, which means you've got something in common with the gentleman in the shirt one size too small beside you, who is also from a rich tradition of rugby. Scully, your dad, one of the great Springboks, who I think still holds the South African record for most punches thrown in a career. There wasn't much TV in those days. When you look at that sense of being a role model, of watching new generations come through, how aware are you of the role that you have as a role model, knowing that you watched your dad and his contemporaries come up and saw what they went through as players?
There was no yellow cards back then, so for a long time I was the leader in the yellow card chart. Luckily for me, Brian Abana had an affinity to knock on intercepts, so he surpassed me. He's got 7 yellow cards and I've only got 6. So no reds, by the way. Bucky Sporta left that. You know, he headbutted Jimmy Cowan once in Auckland. But the first time we, you know, like, you become a professional, but before that you're a youngster, and it's important to have heroes. In South Africa, we didn't see a lot of international sport when we were growing up. So the first thing, obviously being a big rugby fan out of a rugby household, was '95 World Cup. And, you know, as any 12-year-old at the time, you know, we had the heroes. We had Francois was our hero in the Springbok team, and to make a good story, you've got to have a villain, and Sean was obviously the villain, the All Blacks in South Africa. But the thing that doesn't stand out, I think every single South African can remember Nelson Mandela giving handing over the Webb Ellis Trophy to Francois Pienaar. But by that stage, what was the standout for us as youngsters was we went to the open field across from our house, and there was a 30 versus 30, bone-on-bone, full contact game, all classes, all colors, all demographics, all ages. And every time I think of the Rugby World Cup 1905, I've got to remind myself that South Africa actually won the Rugby World Cup. I'm thinking of that game and the fact that I knocked the ball on to score the winning try in the field. That meant nothing. And we as a generation got inspired, and obviously I was fortunate enough to, in 2007, then win a Rugby World Cup with our generation of players that was inspired by Sean and Francois and them in the 95 World Cup, and it was our time to give back to the next generation. And I think the true stars of our current generation is back-to-back Rugby World Cup winners, the current Springbok team. But it's not that. It's I don't think there's ever been a South African national side that embodies modern South Africa like this group. And as we speak now, Chasing the Sun 2, there's a documentary of how they go about winning the World Cup. But they go in depth in the characters and their upbringing, and how tough it was for them, where they came out, whether it was at a township or where you watched the Rugby World Cup final in 2007 in a shebeen with his old man strapped to his mom's back, or whatever the story might have been. And every single kid in South Africa now is missing bedtime by 2 hours because Chasing the Sun airs at 8:30, I think it is, on a Tuesday afternoon. But they're inspiring the next generation of rugby players of all class, all demographic, to get up and get off the streets and go play rugby. Girls, boys, all of them. And you go to a schoolboy rugby festival now, and Dan will attest to it. Rugby is more popular now in South Africa than I think it's ever been. There's more festivals. There's more players playing it. We've got 386 players playing professionally abroad, and most of those kids are kids that didn't make it in South Africa. Come from wherever they come in South Africa. So, I think we're super privileged as pros to give back, and I think as long as we remember where we come from and be grounded and be able to walk up to the youngster and give a little bit of time back to him, I think the world will be in a better place.
I think it's great news to hear about the strength of South African rugby, which is obviously very positive for our Scottish rugby fans in the room. Let's leave rugby for a second and head over to rowing. We've been talking all day, Steve, about sustainability. You sustained a career for an improbable length of time, getting through 5 Olympics, 5 gold medals. As you moved through those Olympics, how much of the motivation was knowing that you had an entire country, an entire nation behind you, willing you on, wanting you to inspire them, and having that and insight? Was it always an inspiration, or was it occasionally a bit of a burden as well?
It can be very much a burden. If you're going back to my first games in '84, is that Great Britain didn't win very many Olympic gold medals. Our funding structure, our whole process of elite sport wasn't that well structured. In fact, we won 5 gold medals in all sports at that games. If you go the games before, we won 5. You go the games before that, we won 3. Before that, it was 4. So there's not a great history. So my first games, there was 5. My second games, there was still 5. 2 of them were from rowing. The third games was still 5. The games after that, we only won 1. And that was the really big changing point. Lottery funding had come on board at that time in the UK, but it was for capital projects. It wasn't for funding the athletes and the sports themselves. And the government at the time decided that they needed to fund sport a little bit more. 5 seemed to be acceptable, 1 wasn't. And so that was the big change. I didn't think that the money itself would have been the killing factor of success. But it was the catalyst for it, is that because we were poorly funded throughout most of the sports, is that we had a pretty good structure in board, and when the lottery was released into the different sports, because of their good systems, they were then able to capitalise that, and we went from winning 5 of my first few games, then to that 1. In Sydney we won 11, and we've been going up since that time. So we're around the sort of 28, 30 mark, which is higher, I think, than we should really be. But we are funded much better than we ever done. But it's not just about the funding. It's got to be about bringing the right people through in the right sports and giving them the opportunity to do so.
There was a fascinating conversation on Jill's panel earlier today on the metrics that sports organisations use to justify, measure, receive funding, and the winning of medals was a big part of that conversation. The medals in themselves maybe not the definitive, but what those can do to inspire what comes below. What's your view on that space? Now, the funding's not just won medals perhaps, but has really kick-started a range of sports across the UK.
That one gold medal that we won in Atlanta, that was Matthew Pinson and myself that won that gold medal. And then the funding came in, as I said, that we had a pretty good system. And so we got very good funding from that process. And that then adds on pressure, because if you're starting to be funded quite well and you've got a good system, is that then there's expectation on that. And then that whole sort of wheel starts spinning in the opposite direction. Is that the administrators, the coaches, all being paid now, where it used to be amateur in my early days, is that then there is that process. You've got to have more success. You've got to be looking for more and more all the time. And if you're not, then your funding gets reduced. So you've got to adapt your system as it evolves to make sure that some of the sports that aren't funded well enough gets funded for the potential, the athletes that they have in that, and then sport like mine that really did struggle in Tokyo 3 years ago, is that perhaps their funding should be cut a little bit. Fortunately, they carried on the same funding, and the team in Paris, I think it's between the Brits and the Dutch, who will be the strongest rowing nation at the Olympics. So there is pressure, but there is also a process. But it's got to be adapted all the time. It's not just one system for 1 year. It's got to evolve in the whole process.
Fitzy, was that New Zealand will also be in the rowing medals? I think Steve failed to mention New Zealand. Even though we're not taking
they were the strongest nation in Tokyo 3 years ago. How many gold medals did they win at the World Championships last year?
Well, that doesn't really matter, Steve. We just focus on Olympics. Now, Peter, we need this. Peter, if you can help me up here, please.
The Australians are looking stronger than New Zealand for this games. That must really hurt.
Well, I know Great Britain has amalgamated from Ireland, Northern Ireland, Wales, Scotland. Maybe it's time for Australia and New Zealand to just play together, perhaps. Fitzy. Let's go back. I saw you cringe when Skylar mentioned 95, so naturally we want to bring it up again. But bring it up in a way that I think many people find surprising. And I remember the first time you answered this question when I put it to you many years ago, I thought you were taking the mickey. I thought, no, this can't be serious. Then you explained why. And for me, it was a very touching and honest reflection when you told me that 95 final is still one of your all-time favourite moments. Even though the result didn't go your way, it was the bus trip on the way home, and you saw, looking out of the bus, just what that win had done for a young democracy coming out of apartheid, coming out of a very, very difficult and troubled past. This, through 80 minutes, well, a bit more, 110 minutes of rugby, had completely turned around a country.
I probably can't emphasise enough the power of sport in terms of my life. I became an All Black in 1986. We had a rugby team that went to South Africa in 1986 called the Cavaliers. It was an illegal rugby team that went to South Africa during the apartheid times, and at that stage no one was meant to be going to South Africa. It was obviously what was happening in South Africa. Ironically, we were the first team back into South Africa in 1992. First sporting team back in to re-engage. We had Desmond Tutu used to travel on our bus. Nelson Mandela was obviously in the mix. He wasn't the president then, but the ANC did not trust what was going on, so they needed to be with us to make sure we did what we said we were going to do. And I didn't even think about it really. I look back now and think, why did we ever go to South Africa in 1986? Some of my best friends, our Prime Minister, said sport is sport, politics is politics. What a load of rubbish. And we still engage with them. So thankfully that has changed. And to go back there in 92 and it was a dream come true for me. As a young boy growing up in New Zealand, I never dreamt of being an All Black, but I never ever thought I'd go to South Africa. And no disrespect to everyone else, they are our greatest foe, they're our greatest challenge, they're the hardest team for us to beat, and then to be able to go there in '92 and play on some of the best rugby grounds in the world against the best rugby players in the world, and to be there in '95. I was 34 years old. It was the end of my career, I thought. I was 32 actually, 32 in those days, and to be captain of an All Black team playing in South Africa where they loved us. It was like we went down to Cape Town in the semi-final to play England, and it was like a home game for us. Everyone wanted the All Blacks to win. And in the space of 4 days, when that great leader said, one team, one country, and everyone turned on us, literally. Every South African turned on us, and it was a very different week. And then to walk into that stadium, into Ellis Park on June the 24th, 1995, I'd never been in an environment like it. It was just a very hostile environment. And then down the tunnel walked the greatest man, Nelson Mandela, wearing Francois' jersey, number 6 Springbok jersey, and they all started chanting Madiba, Madiba, Madiba. The electricity in the place was amazing, and I looked along and Francois was crying, the steam coming out of their ears. Then I looked down our line and I thought, oh shit, we're in trouble here. And it literally was like that. And we lost. There's not a day that goes by even now that I sort of think maybe if we'd done things differently we could have won. But in hindsight, and then to be in the same room as Mandela in 2000, it really made me look back. And it was meant to be, I suppose, for me to be sitting here now talking about the great man, and for our close connection that we had, to have an organisation like Laureus that is changing the world. We are changing the world through Mr. Mandela. And I just think even that day, and you were talking about when we drove back to our hotel, we were crying, we were devastated. We had a good team, and just something just wasn't meant to be. But to be going home, and then to see dancing down the street, a black man, a white man, and a coloured man, arm in arm, celebrating. And the only reason they were doing that is because of sport. And that's what we all have in this room. We have sport. We are so lucky. Sport has the power to change. And in New Zealand at the moment, I had a meeting last week with our Minister of Police. Do not put children into military-style camps. Use sport to change their lives, because sport brings them into the changing room, brings them into the classroom. And the classroom could be a rugby field, could be a boxing ring, could be anything. And Robbie, what Robbie you did in 2002 in setting up Operation Breakthrough, that brought the kids into the classroom, into a rugby field, to teach them respect, to make sure they respected people. They had a father figure. People need father figures, mentors. In rugby, in my sport, rowing, whatever sport you play, that gives you something that you respect. And we can do that, and that's what we need to do in this room, to use sport as a mechanism of change.
I think you can see very clearly why Sean is one of our great sport leaders and enunciating that beautifully. I want to talk about another great sport leader, Schalk, one of my favourite photos over the last few years. Picture back, this is going a while back, picture Schalk with long Gwyneth Paltrow-like blonde hair, which he had a while back. And he's standing after, I think it was a training session, and there's quite a scrawny young kid who's getting a rugby ball signed while a slightly grainy photo is being taken. And I'm sure at the time you didn't think too much of it, but the scrawny kid in that photo is a guy called Siya Kolisi, who has captained the Springboks to 2 consecutive World Cups. And this is a kid, Schalk, who grew up with a brick as his only toy in a township with absolutely nothing as we would see it. And he's one of these great stories that shows what's possible in our country, but also what is possible through sport, as Sean says.
Yes, yeah. Funnily enough, also watched the 2007 Rugby World Cup final, the one we played in a pub, in a Shabine. And at the time, correct, I didn't know. He aged a hell of a lot better than I did. Well, maybe he's got a few more years of rugby left, but he's still got his hair. But he came to Cape Town. Obviously talented. He went to Grey, Port Elizabeth. That's where we trained as the box, and then obviously he just stayed around taking photos of all the kids. And he came to Cape Town, and I sort of took him under my wing, and I said, "Listen, I come, let's work together. I'm open side flanker, you're open side flanker." And at the time, he was young and raw, but I liked him. He phoned me a lot of late nights to go and bail him out of pubs in trouble. He made a lot of mistakes, as I did when I was younger. So we were close like this from the outset. And it was about 2 years after me looking after him, he brought out this photo of old grainy photo of me and him, and he said, "Schalk, this is amazing, you've been my hero." And then I said, "Listen, yes, yeah, it's been so natural, because we sort of alike, the way we think about it and how relaxed we are on and off the field." And we carried that mentorship with, and he played with the bulk of his rugby career in the beginning, under my tutorship, and then once I stepped away and I moved across and Sia started captaining, I gave him a heads up and said, "Listen, this guy's going to become, the next Springbok captain." And, what he's meant to us, as ex-Springboks, but as a country, has been immense. And the respect he's got amongst his peers, I think that's the standout. So often when a lot of success comes to a single person, it's hard to just stay grounded. Sia hasn't changed a day since I met him as a young, loose 18-year-old, trying to become a professional rugby player. So we're still best of mates now, and hopefully he's got a few more years for South Africa.
His is a wonderful story that shows a changing South Africa, the changing face of rugby. Or if you look at when you kicked off, the Women's World Cup wasn't a mainstream event. Rugby was still trying to find its way in terms of the women's game. I look back, I think in the UK last weekend, weekend before, all of the women's Six Nations games had over 1 million people watching on television. The change in women's rugby has been dramatic. It's been overdue, but it has been very welcome. What's your sense of that growth of women's rugby and how important that is for the game?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to play with, some legends in our game, especially in New Zealand, the likes of Anna Richards, Shalford, and, watching them as kids, and alongside my mum as well. And so all those ladies were, my heroes, and you kind of hear stories, or you've seen it, where rugby started from, from wearing loose rugby jerseys to borrowing your brother's rugby boots, or not even having rugby boots when you're younger and playing in bare feet, to now, it's on TV, social media, companies are backing teams, and girls are now, more exposed. And it's an elite sport. It's in the Olympics. It's just really, it's amazing to see where the game is currently and where it's heading to. It excites me, and just to be a part of that is very special.
You obviously played the game at a very elite level, but even if you're just playing it at a club level, at a school level, there is just something about rugby. It brings people together. It fosters this friendship, this comradeship that I think there are very few other sports that can come close to matching.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's that team camaraderie, their teamwork. It's a sense of belonging as well. You form a community as such, and you trust the people around you, and you kind of grow up alongside each other, and now we see, we've formed relationships outside of rugby. We still keep in contact. Some of the girls that I used to play with, they're, some of my best friends, and now they're going on to having children, and it's a fantastic, sport is fantastic, and encourage every child to pick up a sport, whether it's rugby or rowing as such.
And I think both you and Sean have alluded to that sense of community and family around a team. We saw some of that, Steve, last night at the event we had at the Great Britain Consulate, the event that Sean went to instead of going to the New Zealand Consulate event, where we had Abby Bird and Alex Davis both open up very personally about the mental health challenges that they've faced in sport. And I know you've done similar over the last year or two, talking about depression and about dealing with stuff that generally we weren't supposed to talk about in sport. We were supposed to be tough and hard and take it on the chin and move on with it. Thankfully, that's changing. Thankfully, people like yourself, people like Abby and Alex last night, are now being so much more open and using their positions, as you've done, as role models to talk about a subject that's in many cases still quite taboo, and in many cases it takes a little bit of edging out to get people to talk comfortably about it.
Yeah, I think it's really difficult. I didn't have too much problems when I was competing, but there are a number of people that do of suffering with mental health issues, and we have to address that as you go through. My problems were more of when I stopped, is that you've sort of, even though I was a little bit of a maverick in the sport of what I was doing with the people that I rode with and trying to move the sport on in some ways and getting more publicity for the sport, is that once that's over, there's an emptiness. I was lucky enough that as soon as I retired, I was asked if I would get involved in trying to bring the games to London for the 2012 games. That started in 2000. And that gave me my sort of Olympic dream carried on for the 16 years that I was competing, for another 12 years of the delivery side that, and I was on the presenting panel out in Singapore in 2005 when the UK and London got those games. When the cauldron went out at the Paralympics, then there was just this emptiness. There was nothing. What am I going to do now? I turned 50 in that particular year. And suddenly there wasn't any desire, there wasn't any focus of what I was going to do, and it took a long time to get over that. The work I've been doing with Laureus has certainly helped of those areas, but it's something that we have to be addressing the mental health issues across the board. If it's during sport when you're dealing with it, and there is this sort of tough skin that you're supposed to have, is that you're supposed to be invincible. Whatever sport you're involved in, you're not supposed to be showing your weaknesses. So it goes against the natural process of what sport is. But I think you are stronger if you can admit to your downsides. That's what we have to do during training. We have to sort of strengthen our weakened areas within our bodies, and obviously our mind is part of that.
And by extension, I think there are a number of organisations in the room who are dealing with exactly this space. You've dealt with it as a professional athlete, but for a lot of kids here in Hong Kong, around the world, so much pressure in the world we live in today. Sport is that outlet. Sport is that comfort blanket, if you like, that can help get through those difficult times.
Well, certainly it is that, as Sean was talking about earlier, is that sport can change the world and change people's lives. It certainly changed mine. I really struggled at school, educational-wise, very heavily dyslexic, really struggled. I got stopped for doing French. I had to do extra English, and I was put with quite a lot of disruptive children. And you could have easily gone over the sidelines and gone the wrong way. But I stumbled across the sport of rowing, and that if you didn't do your schoolwork, you weren't allowed to go to the river and train afterwards. So I went to school, and that sort of helped from that point of view. So that sort of helped from the sort of educational side. Then I became of an ambassador within the sport. And within British sport, and then you get asked to help governments of all different the flavours of governments that we've had in the UK over the year, of advising them in sport, in education and in health. And so their sport is changing individuals. It's changed my life hugely from that process of coming from a very working class background. Most of our Olympic sports people come from middle class backgrounds, and so what we're doing in the UK now is really changing that process. is that if you've got an aptitude towards sport at the top end, it is of a pathway there, but sport will change your life at whatever element you're doing it. If it's just for fun, recreation, or of the elite element, it is part of that, and that does help mental health process. Everyone likes to be good at something, and there is a sport out there that everybody could be good at.
There is, ideally, with the Laureus project, we support the occasional Huriana or Schalk or Steve or Sean who emerges, but the real purpose is to use power of sport. Or if you look at your career, what sport gave you, this is now the time, I'd imagine, where, right, well, let me return the favour, let me take the lessons, the values I've learned, use the role model status I have to create the kind of change, whether it's in New Zealand that Sean alluded to, that seems to be so needed, or anywhere else in the world. Take what you've got, put that back in, and not just help those spaces, but I'd imagine very rewarding for yourself as well.
Yeah, sports can be used as a platform, to address social issues and advocate for positive changes, whether it's raising awareness about gender equality, promoting environmental sustainability, or tackling issues of social justice. Athletes and sports organisations have a unique platform of amplifying important messages and drive meaningful impact. So I think, we have a very important role as athletes or as ex-sports people to drive that change.
And that change is always a process, and there'll always be more that we can do. How happy are you with where you feel women's rugby is moving, is being supported, is being seen at the moment?
There's been significant changes within the game, but we can always say there can always be more, but it's moving in the right direction, and we can see that with the ladies on the World Seven circuits, having more legs, I should say, and then also the development of women's rugby throughout the country, several countries, and seeing it at the Olympics as well. So there is change, but we need to see more of it at a faster pace.
It's a work in progress.
A work in progress, that's it.
But there are the right kind of people driving, and you are very much one of them. Sculla, I want to talk a little bit about athletes who really get involved with their own spaces as advocates. I look at some good friends of yours. Sia has got his own foundation. JP Dermody has a foundation. Brian Banner has a foundation. Athletes who've really decided that their purpose post-career is to create a space where they make such an impact, where they give back so much. Talk to me about some of those people who are not just good friends of yours, but compatriots, and who you've seen have a real impact back home.
Yeah, I mean, obviously COVID was a standout for us, where they delivered food packages to people who couldn't get to shops. They couldn't get food. And I think that springboarded a lot of it. But I think genuinely all of us put our hands up to go help them deliver these food packages. And I mean, if you're hungry, we're hungry, we go buy a sandwich. If they're hungry, they were waiting for us to go deliver food packages. And I think it's something that was close to all of these people's hearts, but it's also something they felt they needed to do for society, give back. They've had a chance in life through sport, and this was their time to use their network, all of us, to jump on board and go to the rural areas and go deliver meals. But I think after COVID, the thing that really stands out is how much enjoyment they've had from this process. Sia goes into the township, and I mean, he should be our president, I think. He gets carried on their hands, and they remember him as Springbok captain, but they remember him more for what he did in a time where the government was doing anything, and him as a rugby player was delivering food packages to people who couldn't get food. So it's such a privilege to be amongst those blokes. Brian Banner's got an amazing foundation, and the joy they got back out of it, and the willingness they've got to improve and give more and give up more of their time. And Sia's foundation is a massive foundation. It's so nice whenever he gives you the heads up that he's heading into Langa, or he's heading into the next rural township. Do you want to come with? And you lend a hand. It's super enriching.
We've also got a terrific project in South Africa, another one of our fellow ambassadors, Babalwa Lachwa, one of our star women's players, who's doing a great project with period poverty, which is a very real issue in somewhere like South Africa. All of these spaces speak to projects, places in need, and I'll ask Sean, both you and Steve, a couple of these projects, as you visited them all over the world, and it's never onerous. It's never something that feels like a chore, because I know every time you leave these projects, there is a skip in your step, and these kids who, by our standards, may seem to have so little, give so much joy, and there's so much good that comes out of these spaces.
Well, I think so. I've been very fortunate, as we all have, to visit these projects and see what sport is doing to change their lives. If I could just give you oh God, I've been to so many, but the ones that really stand out to me, 2005, I went to Sierra Leone with skateboarder Tony Hawk. Oh my gosh, old age. Him and I went there in 2005. The Civil War just finished, and we went there and went to a project, and there was children running around with hands that had been cut off because if they didn't join the rebels, they'd have their hands cut off. And these children don't do anything other than being child combatants, basically. But we went there, Tony took his skateboard, I took my rugby ball, and they had no idea who we were, but we brought a smile to their face. And the project that was running there was just saying to the children, you have the right to be children. And amazing that was. Went to South Africa on a family Christmas one year, and the local foundation there, run by Morne Duplessis, asked me if I'd like to visit a couple of the projects. They had a lovely surfing project, and I thought this would be great to take the kids to the surfing project. And we hopped in the van, we're heading not towards the surfing project, not towards the beach, we were going to the Cape Flats. And I said, where are we off to? And they said, we're going to Bonnie Town. What's Bonnie Town? It's a juvenile detention centre where children go to from the age of 13 to 17. And if they can show they're changing, they go before the judge and they may be released. These children are murderers, and it changed my life. And we went in there and we went to the common room, and the children in the common room weren't allowed outside. They were too bad. But they had tattoos on their face, tear drips of how many people they had killed. And these children were 13, 14, 15 years old. And we had 2 projects running in there. 3 days a week, the Laureus guys would go in and they'd teach them how to play rugby. And then we had a boxing project also. They would teach them how to box. And these kids were outside. And the difference in those children was phenomenal, purely through the power of sport. I could go on and on and on. I think probably one of the great ones is a project in northern India called UWA, which is a girls project. This American couple tramping through northern India came across this village, and it was a group of men and women and children. At that stage when they arrived, there was 98% illiteracy amongst the girls. 100% of the girls would become child brides. And they said, what is going on? This is ridiculous. So they set up a school and started bringing these girls in, and they used football. And in those days, girls were not allowed to play football. They weren't allowed to wear shorts. They said, no, you can play football. And these girls came to Monaco. They won the Sport for Good award. In that village now, 10% child brides, possibly. 100% of the girls speak English. Or they can read and write. And they came to the awards in Monaco, and I asked them the question. I said, well, what is the greatest thing about doing what you do now? And they said, Sean, the greatest thing is we can now dream. We can dream. Where before they couldn't dream because they knew they'd be a child bride. They wouldn't be able to read and write because it's the boys' thing. But I loved it. We can dream. Everyone in this room dreams every day. They never thought they'd ever dream. So, the power of sport.
That's cold shiver stuff there, Fitzy. Thank you. Just a follow-up there, Steve. One or two of the project experiences you've had that have given you a similar feeling to Sean?
I went out to Sri Lanka just after the tsunami, and that was very eye-opening of a country that is very, very flat. Going from one end of the country to the other, and going to some of the orphanages there, and then tide marks of where the sea levels came up to. And when the tsunami came in, they were saying that they had to rush to the high point to save people's lives, and it was just like a few feet higher than the compound they're in. And obviously it's a lot of cricket being played out there, and of a rower that's not very coordinated playing cricket with some of these very young kids and small kids were taking me a part of there. Very impressive to see. Again, being out in India of the Magic Bus project of a mobile unit being able to go around into communities of serving sport. Where we've talked a little bit about the elite side of it, I've certainly talked about the elite side of it. It is that grassroots level that makes such a difference, of putting the smiles on people's faces, the joy that they have. I went out to Zambia once, second poorest country in the world. As you drove out to one of the campaigns that's ravaged by AIDS, is that literally the people are breaking up rocks by the side of the road, making little piles, and a lorry comes along and they put that into the lorry that gives them a few shekels to survive. And we went out there with sports kits and balls. This orphanage that we went to is that they were playing football with a rubbish bag that had been taped up, and we just threw them a ball in, and they just went absolutely crazy. It was just amazing to see. So seeing the smiles on their people's faces is just incredible to see. As we keep saying, the power of sport is unbelievable at whatever level that you're at. But that grassroots level in the poorest countries in society is just incredible to see and be part of.
I love hearing these stories of the impact. I think it gives so much ammunition to what we're all trying to do in this greater space. Sadly, we're almost at an end. It's been a wonderful chat with all of you. Very quickly, Rory, if I can get a word or two from you. If I look at, I think Chris is still around, the guys from Pass It Back. They've got an amazing programme that brings girls into rugby. We talked about there is still a need to do a little more. What for you would be one or two of those first steps? What can we do more to get more into women's rugby and to use women's rugby as the tool to deliver on the kind of spaces we've been talking about today?
I think we're doing it. We're inviting women rugby players to events like this as such, and using us as ambassadors to promote women's rugby in schools and in underprivileged communities as well. You know, I've been a part of some awesome initiatives where we've gone into communities, you know, and just taking equipment and spending time with them, and like everyone has said on the stage, it's just putting smiles on the faces of kids, and that's what it's all about. So it's it's showing them what it looks like, or what we look like, and it's empowering them that they can do it too, and sharing our experiences.
That is such an important message. It's one that is gaining traction, but there is more traction to be had, and having people like you support it is so important. So, Rory, thank you. We can't let you guys go without just a quick word on the weekend ahead. Sculler, I know that normally a weekend out watching rugby with a few beers is not really your sort of thing, but you are making an exception. How excited is Schalk Burger for this weekend?
Well, I'm super excited not to be on television. Normally I've got to wait for the beers till later on, and then I'll get into bed a little bit later, so I can start nice and early, but super excited. A little bit worried about the blitz box. We've had a change in coaching staff. Philip Snyman obviously been in the system for a long time. We got off to such a good start in Dubai, and then we sort of lost our little way a bit. So, you know, we in a transition period where, you know, we had such a great culture under Neil Powell, where you can pick pretty much any player, and we sort of just responded and stepped up to it. We're quite reliant on our senior players now, so I hope the Blitzboks go deep, but if they don't, I'm always been a fan of the Los Pumas, so Argentina.
All right, to your immediate right,
What do you mean you've always been a fan of Argentina? Only since they started winning this year.
We've all been on tours to Argentina, and you can't help but fall in love with the place, man. It's a good tour. It's always been.
Oh dear. Steve, just in closing very quickly, we've got a number of organisations here who do such incredible work in different areas of sport. What's your word of motivation, encouragement to all of our sporting friends here to keep on doing the incredible jobs that they are?
We're ambassadors, obviously, of Laureus, and we go around the world of seeing some of the projects and supporting these projects. But you guys are the people that are here making the difference in people's lives on a day-to-day basis. So keep doing what you're doing, give more and more people the opportunity, and we thank you for all the work that you're doing within sport that's making the change in people's lives. Please keep doing it.
And finally, Mr. Chairman, just a word to the team who put the summit together. It's been really special for Laureus to be part of this. We're really allied in terms of what the philosophies are today. And Laureus, a quick word of thanks from yourself.
Thank you to everyone for being here, this week. Really, we are so proud to be the charity partner of Hong Kong Rugby, and we're just thankful that we've been given the opportunity. Through the great man Nelson Mandela, to be able to use our voice to help change the world. So thank you for your presence, thanks for what you do, and we'll continue doing what we do in terms of using sport as a power for change.
Ladies and gentlemen, hooray, Manuel-Carpenter, Schalk Burger, Sir Steve Redgrave, and Sean Fitzpatrick. Guys, thank you. And if I can ask you to just line up beside me here.